一个兄弟来看我，带着银子和故事，他微笑着对我说：“人民不需要自由。”
这是最好的年代，
最好的年代，
人民不需要自由，
自由，
这是最好的年代。
有人沉默着观望，有人怀疑着生活，听见他们在歌唱。 人民不需要自由，
人民不需要自由，
自由，
这是最好的年代。
最好的年代。
人民不需要自由，这是最好的年代。
兄弟喝多了再哭。 爱能应当的太久，这是我总会想起。人民不需要自由，
人民不需要自由，这是最好的年代。人民不需要自由，这是最好的年代。
如今留下了一切，除了杯子和袋子，他一直想告诉我。 人民不需要自由，人民不需要自由，
这是最好的年代。
人民不需要自由，
这是最好的年代。
人民不需要自由，
这是最好的年代。
人民不需要自由，
这是最好的年代。
张文。元帅帅。 鱼干你。
Well, hello everyone, welcome back. I'm your friend XO. So here is a website that I made during this day. At the beginning, you may think that, well, this is a super simple application. It's just have one single page, right? But actually it's not. At the back end, I made a lot of functions to achieve such an application. To be honest, it's a lot of work to do. But let me try to explain to you what I did today. At the start, let me just show you the functionality. Well, as we all know that for a global website, it has to has beautiful languages for their customers, right? For now, you can see we only got 3 JSON files. At each JSON file, it got its own language. For now, it only got 3, but in the actual situation, you may get maybe 7 languages at the single website. So it can be a little bit tedious, or let's say almost impossible for you to manually do the copy and pasting for, let's say, 7 languages. What if you have, let's say, 500 words to replace? What are you gonna do? You're gonna go to different JSON file and do the copy and paste manually? No, it's never gonna work. So what I did is to make this platform to simplify my work. For example, here, as you could say, it got the header word, which is the first row here. In the Japanese side, it's this word. In the simple Chinese version, it's this line of text. So what would happen if I hit the next button? If we do that, you know, it will jump into the next line, which is this line. Oh, probably not. Your name is, it's jumping into this line. Okay, that's fine. I don't really care, but actually that's the case. And let me just hit the next button again. Wow, it ends there. Oh, here we go. If we go through it again, like start a new process, you say here we got the fine, and here I got this line of code. code, and I have this line of code. It's all in one single view so that I could modify it with an either way. And if I hit the next button again, you would say it start to jump into this one, which is correct. And if I hit it again, it will jump to the high, which is also correct. And I hit it again, bingo, it's right in here. So now I know where's the problem. So at the beginning, what you say is this line of code. That's why it ends here. Alright, but I haven't finished yet. For example, if I want to change the code or change the text, what I would do? I would just do some modification on the text box. And for now, as you could say, for the English version, it only got the your name is, but if I hit the next button, you would say now it becomes I am in Saxo, so it will generally replace all those contents automatically for you. And when it's done, you will see this page. Well, actually, for this one, the interesting part is that you could just specify the localhost folder you want. For now, I'm specifying this folder, but actually you could specify any other folder. It's fine because on the back end, I have used a database called MongoDB to actually store those projects. So for each project, it has its own process. For example, whether you are at the first line or whether you are at the second line, for each project, for each location, it has its own process. And here's another interesting feature I want to show you. For example, out here, we got the English version, right? But what if in other JSON file, it doesn't have those information? For example, here, I would just delete all those lines. We only left it with this one, test, okay. And for this one, I will just simply delete those things. Okay, then what will happen? I could tell you, it will do the merge. It will try as best as possible to merge all of them to remain the largest set. What I mean is, for other JSON file, it will try to follow this format. Don't believe me? Then let me just try it out. Here, if I had the submit button, and if we go back to it again, you will say the jp.json and the sc.json has automatically added those missing keys for it with the empty string. So now you know that I'm really doing a lot of work under the hook. Okay, now after the simple demonstration, let me just have a talk at the technique side, which can be a little bit tedious for those general people. I mean, those people who don't know how to code, but that's fine. Let me just try to go through this process. Well, at the beginning, for the backend part, I'm using the nodejs, and I'm using the TypeScript, and I'm using a protocol called graphql. Well, it's something like this. I think it as a protocol at the beginning. I wrote it like I'm writing the gRPC protocol, and then I found that, well, it's not the same. Okay, so after I wrote those types, what I did is to import it into the resolver, and I say write those functions that it needs. And after that, I use the business logic, where it's many the business logic. Well, despite of that, there has a lot of code. Besides of that, I have separated the models model out. The models model, it's generally for the MongoDB part. It's a simple one. And I have also used the redis library because I want to store an active project. Since, you know, for now, it's only for one time, it will only have one user because it's running on my local service. But if we want to, let's say if we want to make this service available to other people, then we have to consider the multi-user use case, which can be a little bit complex. Okay, well, for all those things, it doesn't matter. It's just like the same. But for this time, I'm using something different. I'm using this one, GraphQL code gun. Why I use that? Because it will generally compile all those GraphQL code into a generated types, so that we could use it, for example, in our resolvers, so that whenever we made a mistake, for example, I added 2 here, you'll say it will cause an error because it says that we don't have that function in our protocol. And also, it will help us to make all those things clear. Like if we got some arguments, we would exactly know what kind of variable that we got there. And I know some of you may think, well, you are so stupid, why don't you just use Java, the Spring Boot? Well, I agree with you. We could use the Java, and I basically know that also. But for this time, I just wanted to, you know, make myself feel like I'm using the single one language to do all those things. Okay, this is the only reason why I do this with nodejs. But maybe for the next time, I'll just use the Java to do that kind of thing. Yeah, of course, if I use Java, I would definitely use a MySQL database than the MongoDB. And also, here's an interesting thing about all those things. For example, for the generation part, it has a watch parameter, which means whenever you change the protocol, it will automatically do the generation again and again. And for this time, I have even wrote the test for the backend side. I have never done this before. I mean, writing test for nodejs service. I have never do that before, but for this time I did it. And to be honest, I have wrote a lot of tests out there. Why I do that? Because simply I feel like, you know, for the nodejs, it doesn't have a debugger. So all I could do is just write the test so that I could know that, oh, I wrote some good function. I mean, I wrote some functions that will fit my needs because I have wrote the test and the test is passed. Yeah, that's the reason for that. Oh, and by the way, for this test, I have also used the watcher kind of thing so that whenever I change the code in the test folder or other functions, the test will get running again and again automatically, which is super cool. Okay, now let's go back to the front-end part. For the front-end part, I have never used the GAN, I mean the code GAN before for the GraphQL. Why? Because for the last year when I use the GraphQL, probably they do not have a code gun, or I don't have the command to do a search for this generation tool. But I think if I did, I would be quite happy at that time when I use the GraphQL, because I think without the type generation kind of thing, I would definitely go mad if you ask me to do the GraphQL development. But for now, everything is okay because we got the code generation, and in the end, what we could do is to just use that. For example, here I have imported that generated part and I use it as the grl command directly. So in here, you wouldn't see me use any GraphQL language, but instead I wrote it all right in here. But it will generate the correct command for us so that we could use it directly. And in the end, the interesting part about it is that when you use those types, you could, for example, here have the automation you would have the compilation functionality here without any problem, which will again simplify our work. Oh, and also for the less CSS processor, I did some hack here. For example, for the CSS file, I have defined a global.less file, and in one of the components, I did an import right in here. And then you know what? It just magically happened that once it's getting imported once, you could use it anywhere without importing it again. For example, here I have used the function, the CSS selector again, and even if I didn't do the importing, I could still use it. So this is quite convenient, as I think, because for me, I would use the rows, clones, center, full screen a lot. Alright, this is today's creation part, and I hope you enjoy it. To be honest, I was kind of love the feeling for creating a useful project from the scratch, because it would make me feel like, well, I'm still a valuable person or useful person for someone else. Well, that's my thinking, and that's it. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.